Hi, I'm Blessy Joseph with the Office of Career Services at Southeast Missouri State University, and I will be presenting on Acing Your First Professional Interview. Now, your resume has been reviewed and you've been informed that they're wanting to interview you. First, give yourself a pat on the back because you are halfway there. So first things first, what are some things that you should know before going for that interview? You want to be aware of the different types of interviews out there. The more common types of interviews are the one-on-one, where you will be interviewing with a hiring director, a panel setting, where you will be interviewed by a number of people who will all be taking turns asking you questions. And then if after that first interview, they're still wanting to gain more information, then they will call you in for a second interview. Now, some less common types of job interviews are like a phone interview, a group interview, for which you might want to find a positive way to stand out. And then you might be asked to complete a written test or to complete a certain task in the work environment that you are wanting to work in. They might even invite you over for a lunch interview. One tip with lunch interviews is that you want to order simple food so that you would be able to engage in conversation and answer those questions while you're eating. And then there are some job interviews that will require to see how you operate under stress. So that is another less common type of job interview setting. And now an up and coming interview type is the video interview, which is over Skype or Zoom, especially with the things that are happening with the pandemic. There is an increase in video interviews. All right, now that we've covered the different types of interviews you could be called in for, let's look at the different types of interview questions you could expect in that interview. So first, we have general questions. They're like, tell me about yourself. What do you know about our company? Why should we hire you? And what makes you a good candidate for this position? So usually, if they don't ask these questions in these exact words, a variation of these questions can be expected at every interview. So these are some questions which you can practice ahead of time or be prepared for. For instance, with the tell me about yourself question, a good cheat sheet would be your resume. So they're primarily looking for you to tell them about your education and experiences within 1 minute. And then before you attend the interview, a good rule of thumb is to research the company and know some details about the company that would help you impress the hiring directors or the interviewers. Second, we have behavioral questions. So the logic behind these questions is that how you behaved in the past will determine how you will behave in the future. An example of such a question is, describe a time when you had to work in a team. This requires that you do some sort of storytelling. So there's a chance that you either don't give enough information or you might overtell the story. So in order to avoid either of these errors, we encourage you to use the STAR method when recalling the time, the situation. So with the STAR method, S stands for situation, so you describe the situation. T stands for task, so you explain the task that you had to complete in that situation. A stands for action, describe the specific actions that you took to complete the task and the results. So what was the outcome of your efforts? So if you maintain this formula, you would be able to tell the story in the most effective manner. Third, we have situational questions. These are questions that are future focused and hypothetical. There's a possibility that you might have encountered this situation previously, in which case then you can use your past experiences to answer this. However, if not, don't worry about it, because you can describe how you would figure it out. What are some steps that you would take to resolve the situation that they've introduced to you. And lastly, we have brain teasers or skill-based questions. If you are unfamiliar with these types of questions, I would recommend that you Google some brain teasers just for fun. These questions are like riddles. They're rather difficult in nature, but then the intent of these questions is not to test if you can answer the question correctly, but to assess your problem-solving ability, like how creative you are, how fast you can start processing a difficult question of that sort. All right, now, how are you to be prepared for every type of question they might ask you? Well, thinking that you can be prepared for every question they might ask is rather unrealistic. However, you can be prepared for these questions. Most of these questions are primarily assessing your transferable skills, such as communication skills, problem-solving skills, leadership skills, and so on. So take some time to think of how you have used these skills in the past. Write them down. A great formula is the STAR method that we talked about in the previous slide when formulating these answers. Then practice, practice, practice. Don't just think it. Rehearse these responses. Speak it out loud. Get comfortable saying it out loud. Maybe even practice in front of the mirror. Schedule a mock interview with us at the Office of Career Services. Practice with a friend or a family member. Just get comfortable saying these, talking and comfortable with these responses and these stories that you have that highlight these skills. All right. So now there are also some questions that are considered illegal. So interviewers are not allowed to ask these questions. So you can see some of these questions listed in the slide. But it's always good to know what these questions are, just so that you can protect yourself. With these questions, you can either choose to answer them or refuse to answer them, or even examine the intent behind the questions. For instance, they can't ask you how old you are or when you were born, but maybe they're just trying to identify if you are old enough to work. So are you 18 years of age or older? That's appropriate. They can ask you if you have a disability, but they might be more concerned about whether you can perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation. So that is okay. By no means can they ask you anything about your gender identity, so you can choose to refuse that answer. Marital or family status, they can ask you if you have children or if you're married, but they can ask you if you would be able to work the specified schedule. They can't ask you anything directly about your race, color, or ethnicity. But if you are not a US citizen, they can ask you if you are authorized to work in the US. But they can even ask you what language you're able to speak fluently. Lastly, they can't ask you about your religion, but they can ask you if you can work weekends, right? Now that we are prepared to tackle the interview, let's decide what you want to wear to make that great first impression. So you can choose to dress in a business professional attire. This is a safe choice if you are unsure of the company culture. Your suit, jacket, and pant or skirt will need to be matching and preferably a solid dark or neutral color. Under the suit, wear a light colored shirt or blouse. Avoid wearing stripes or bright prints or colors as it can be distracting. For shoes, wear closed-toe heels or dress shoes. And then when going in for the interview, you want to bring essentials only, like your portfolio, a professional bag, or a simple purse. If possible, we would recommend that you try to leave your cell phones in your car, but if you aren't able to do so, make sure that it is switched off and out of sight with your personal items. This way, we don't risk the phone ringing or vibrating midway through the interview. The same thing goes for your smartwatches that are connected to your cell phones. Business casual is considered daily work attire, according to this infographic. But if your research reveals that this type of attire is acceptable within this company's culture, then go for it. A nice pants or slacks with a nice button-down shirt or top with closed-toe shoes can be acceptable. If you choose to wear a dress or a skirt, make sure they are knee length when standing and your thighs are covered while sitting down. You want to wear a tie to the interview. You can even choose to wear a dark colored blazer or cardigan. Some general recommendations when going to that interview are that you want to make sure your clothes fit you well. They're in good condition, ironed, wrinkle-free, and lint-free. Make sure your shoes are neat and clean. If you are wearing a belt, make sure they match the color of your shoes and your attire. In addition, you want to have a well-groomed hairstyle. So if you have long hair and have a tendency to play with your hair when you're nervous, pull your hair back so you prevent appearing unprofessional in the interview. A natural style is recommended for nails and makeup. If you choose to wear any jewelry or fragrance, keep the jewelry to a minimum and mild fragrance, because there are people who do have allergies to certain scents. The last thing we need is for our perfume to trigger our interviewers' allergies. And lastly, if you have tattoos or piercings, research ahead of time and align to the company's culture and standard. All right. Now, how early should you arrive at your interview? A good rule of the thumb is arriving at least 10 to 15 minutes before the start of your interview. You want to avoid being on time, as it is considered late. At the same time, you don't want to arrive too early, like before 15 minutes, as this can look as if you don't respect your interviewer's schedule, as they probably will have other meetings or commitments before your interview, right? Now, after the interview, you want to make sure that you send the interviewer a thank you note. It can either be an email or a mailed handwritten card. But if it's an email, you want to send it within 24 hours, while a mail card will need to be sent within 72 hours. Then comes the waiting. This might seem like forever, so what can you do in the meantime? Review the interview and assess what you heard and saw. Would you see yourself fitting within that company? Would you enjoy working in such a space? And if you haven't heard back from them within the time frame that they mentioned, follow up with them with an email or a phone call. And then if an offer is made, awesome, set expectations. This is when you will do salary negotiations and discuss benefits. However, if you don't receive an offer, don't burn bridges. You never know, a couple of years down the road, you might find a position at the same company that you'd like to apply for. And this way you can still apply since you maintained a good relationship with the company. All right. Okay, so here at Career Services, we want to help you be successful. So don't hesitate to contact us and schedule your appointment. Right now, you can reach us using our email, careerservices@semo.edu. So just email us and then they will get back with you to get that appointment scheduled. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us today.